You ever pull up to a house you legally own? The house your great-aunt left you, and find a locksmith standing at the front door like he belongs there? Yeah, that happened to me. And for about 10 seconds I actually thought someone had rented a very bad prank out to my neighborhood. Then he said with a straight face, "New owner wants the locks changed today," and everything went sideways. I should tell you straight away, I didn't expect drama when I inherited that place. My aunt was one of those characters you hear about in stories, lived alone, mid-century house, full of quirks, terrazzo floors that creaked, the way only old houses creak, built-in planters she tended like pets, the kind of home that smells faintly of lemon cleaner and mystery. She'd been reclusive late in life, kept to herself, but she was tidy, and she'd left me the house in her will. I transferred the deed, paid the property taxes, paid the HOA dues when they came, and I gave them my mailing address, the one I use for everything. Simple, right? Not even close. I was working a 2-year contract out of state planning to move in later, so I'd pop down on weekends to mow the tiny front yard, check the pipes, wave at a neighbor if our schedules matched. 8 months of that rhythm. Then one Saturday I drove down to start planning renovations. I pulled into the driveway and there was a van I didn't own and a guy with a toolbox at my front door. My stomach dropped, the kind of drop that steals the sound from your ears. "Can I help you?" I called, trying for calm. He looked up, looked at me like I'd interrupted his Tuesday, and said, "New owner wants the locks changed today." Those words hit me like a truck. I told him I was the owner, and he showed me a work order property sold at auction 3 days ago. HOA paperwork sent him. My hands shook. I asked him to wait while I figured things out. He agreed, bless him, because he wasn't the villain here. He was just a guy with a job. I sprinted to the mailbox because, maybe I'd missed something. The mailbox was full bills, ads, then a stack of HOA envelopes that smelled faintly of bad decisions. Past due notices, final notices, notice of intent to lien, and a notice of foreclosure sale. My legs felt like rubber. According to those letters, I owed over $15,000 in special assessments for unauthorized landscaping. Apparently my aunt's decades-old desert landscaping violated some new rule. The final notice said the property had been sold at a non-judicial foreclosure auction for $25,000. $25,000 for a house worth $400,000 or more. Every notice was dated within the past 3 months, and they were sent to the house address, not my mailing address that I'd given the HOA. The final notice was 4 days old. I called the HOA immediately. The receptionist transferred me to the president, a woman who sounded like she'd swallowed a bowl of entitlement. When I told her I'd inherited the house and I'd given them a mailing address, she said flat that notices were properly sent to the property as required by law. "Property owners are responsible for checking their property regularly," she said. Her tone was like she was describing a missing package, not someone's home. She told me the sale was final. I had 48 hours to remove my belongings and hung up. I sat on the front steps and felt my world tilt. You can't just steal someone's house because they don't read the mail at a vacant address, I kept thinking. But there was a locksmith waiting and a paperwork trail that looked official. I called the locksmith over, explained there was a legal dispute, and he, practical, decent guy, put the job on hold. That night I went down the rabbit hole of foreclosure law. HOAs can foreclose for unpaid assessment, sure, but there are strict notice requirements and standards of reasonableness. Sending mail to a vacant house when they have the owner's address might not cut it. The next morning I drove to the county recorder's office and pulled the auction records. The buyer was listed as Desert Holdings LLC, an entity formed 2 weeks before the auction. The registered agent, someone with the same last name as the HOA president. This was starting to look less like a clerical error and more like a plan. I walked into the HOA office and met the woman in person. She was shorter than I imagined, with perfectly styled hair and a face that made you feel she was doing you a favor by speaking at all. "You must be the nephew," she said, as if my existence inconvenienced her. She handed me a 1-page resolution, 3 signatures dated 3 months ago, announcing a new landscaping policy and the $15,000 assessment. When I asked for the meeting minutes and proof of a community vote, which the bylaws required for assessments over $5,000, she sighed, said board records were confidential, and told me the sale was final. Her smugness was a thing. She talked about bringing the property into compliance, as if ripping out 30 years of a woman's garden and pouring in turf was a public service. I left the office and called a real estate attorney who specialized in HOA fights. He listened, asked the good questions, and agreed to take the case. His first move was an emergency motion to stop any transfer pending investigation. Second move, tell me to comb through my aunt's files. My aunt was a paralegal by trade and an archivist by habit. She'd kept everything. In her office, I found a fat folder labeled HA evidence file. It was a treasure trove: correspondence, invoices, meeting minutes, and the thing that made my blood run hot, copies of fraudulent invoices, contracts with her HOA president's companies, and a paper trail that screamed embezzlement. The bylaws were clear assessments over 5,000 needed community approval. Barbara, that's what her name turned out to be, had been running the board with a crew of relatives and friends, signing off on shell company invoices and lining pockets for years. I called my attorney and told him to file everything. He did. He filed an injunction, a motion to invalidate the foreclosure for lack of proper notice, and sent copies to the state attorney general. The AG's office got interested. They'd been getting complaints about HOA fraud in the county. The locksmith called me that afternoon to say someone from Desert Holdings wanted him to reschedule. They were trying to rush the transfer change, the locks take possession before we could move. My attorney told me to be there when they tried, document everything, record everything. Possession is powerful, he said, but illegitimate possession can be undone. They did show up a woman who claimed to be the property manager, a heavy-set lawyer who looked like he'd eat subpoenas for breakfast, and the locksmith. I recorded the confrontation. The lawyer said the sale was final, I said the foreclosure was under challenge, and the locksmith, who just wanted to be a neutral party, packed up and left. The property manager and lawyer whispered, then drove away. That little power play trying to bully me out became evidence of consciousness of guilt. It made them look like they knew something was wrong. I started talking to the neighbors. One older man in his garden told me he'd been raising alarms about sudden fee spikes and phantom projects for months. Another neighbor said her assessment doubled without explanation. My aunt had been the only one asking for records. She'd promised to clean house. When she got sick, she couldn't finish. Barbara saw the chance and she took it. The community was full of people with similar stories, and suddenly the picture was clear. This wasn't a single reckless action, it was a scheme. 2 days later, the AG's office executed search warrants on the HOA office and Barbara's home. Boxes of documents disappeared into evidence. They were investigating criminal embezzlement, not just civil mismanagement. The next morning, Barbara called me, suddenly soft and conciliatory, offering to sell the house back for cost, plus expenses, $40,000 for a house she'd managed to grab for $25,000. I told her no. She tried everything: threats about property values, insinuations about resources. It didn't matter. The law had teeth now. The news trucks showed up. The arrests followed. Barbara and 2 other board members were charged with fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. Reporters wanted interviews. I let my attorney handle that. In court, the case collapsed under the weight of the documents my aunt had kept. Desert Holdings quietly quit-claimed the property back to me in exchange for my dropping personal suits. The HOA's insurance covered my legal fees and damages. The community held emergency elections, and neighbors who had been silenced found their voices. Months later, sitting on the back patio where my aunt used to sort through her files, the locksmith walked up sheepish. He apologized, said Barbara had been calling him to change the locks, offering double, triple pay. He'd refused once he realized something smelled rotten. That confession became part of the criminal case. It showed intent, planning, and effort to obstruct. Barbara pled guilty, got 3 years, and was ordered to pay restitution, which meant her own house was foreclosed to pay the debt. The irony didn't need a narrator. We kept my aunt's desert garden. The new board declared it protected heritage landscaping. We installed new rules: full transparency, monthly financial reports, oversight for expenses over $500. I signed on as HOA treasurer. Sometimes I sit on that back patio and think about her, how patient she'd been, how stubborn, how quiet her fight was. She didn't live to see the arrests, but her folder did the talking for her. Her slow, steady work did the hard part. Here's the thing I learned from the whole mess, and this is the bit I want you to feel. Power doesn't always wear a badge. Sometimes it wears a smile and a perfectly styled haircut, and it convinces you that rules are for other people. But persistence, paperwork, and showing up matter. The quiet, bureaucratic stuff, filing motions, demanding minutes, keeping receipts. That's where justice lives sometimes. You don't always win by shouting the loudest. Sometimes you win by keeping every little scrap of paper and refusing to be invisible. Oh, before you think I'm done preaching, one last smaller story because life loves irony. A few weeks ago, I was out of town sitting at a hotel bar doing the usual eat, drink, pretend to be rested. A group from a bachelorette party rolled in and a couple of guys started buying rounds, then acting like they owned the night. One guy got mad when the women politely refused anything more than the courtesy of a free shot, started cussing them out. I walked over and said, real calm, if you buy someone drinks, don't act entitled to their phone number. You bought a shot, not a soul. He sputtered. They left. He whined. You don't buy people, I told him. You buy a moment, maybe a story, nothing more. So tell me, when someone with power or privilege crosses the line, what do you think should happen? Is it enough to expose them and let the law do its work? Or should communities take tougher, preemptive steps? Share your story. Tell me if you've ever had to fight someone who thought they could steal what's yours, or just tell me the best apology you ever got from a locksmith. I want to hear it.